We're already on the beach, Chloe. We only invited the people who actually matter to the family's future. Just overnight the keys to the West Wing. Don't make a scene, it's beneath you. Before we dive into how I took back my father's legacy, please hit that subscribe button and the bell icon, and let me know in the comments which city and what part of the world you're watching from today. Let's get back to the story. That was my stepmother, Eleanor Sterling, calling me from the glass house, the sprawling cedar-shingled estate perched on a bluff in Sconset, Nantucket. It was the house my father had built with his own hands and sweat, the one he had left to me. Yet here was Eleanor telling me I wasn't family enough to attend my own family's summer kickoff. I didn't scream. I didn't let my voice shake. I simply leaned against my desk in my Boston studio and watched the rain streak the windows. I'll send the keys, Eleanor. You'll have them in time for the gala. I hung up. 3 days later, I did exactly what I promised. I sent a heavy, cream-colored envelope. When Eleanor opened it at the Nantucket Maritime Charity Gala in front of 85 of the most influential people in New England, she let out a scream so curdling that the string quartet snapped to a halt mid-Vivaldi. But to understand what was in that envelope, and why it caused a 58-year-old socialite to lose a fortune she'd spent 4 years methodically stealing, you have to understand the girl I used to be. My name is Chloe Vance. I am 34 years old, a landscape architect who specializes in historic New England estates. I spend my days fixing the foundations of houses that are crumbling. I should have realized sooner that my own life's foundation had been rotting right under my feet. Before the scandal, there was just the salt. The glass house sat on a cliff overlooking a stretch of the Atlantic that turned silver at dawn. It was a 4-bedroom masterpiece of shingle-style architecture, with a wraparound porch and a view that could make a person forget the 21st century. In early 2026, a high-end firm appraised it at $6.8 million. To the world, it was a trophy. To me, it was my father's heartbeat. My father, Arthur Vance, was a man of quiet strength. He was an estate attorney, a man who spent his life protecting the legacies of others. He bought the glass house in 2003, 2 years after my mother passed away. I was 11 then. He told me the house was a reset button. Every summer, it was just the two of us. We didn't hire contractors, we were the contractors. While other girls were learning to apply mascara, my father was teaching me the difference between a load-bearing beam and a decorative joist. "This house has good bones, Chloe," he'd say, tapping a blueprint. "Never trust a structure that looks pretty but can't hold its own weight." I decided to become an architect on that porch. It was the place where my father stopped being just a parent and became my best friend. Then came Eleanor. Eleanor Sterling entered our lives when I was 18, just as I was heading off to the Rhode Island School of Design. She was polished, articulate, and possessed a frighteningly keen ability to make my father feel like he was the center of the universe. Her daughter, Sloane, arrived a year later, a mirror image of her mother's hollow grace. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. Every time I returned from college, I felt less like the owner's daughter and more like a guest. "This house is yours, Chloe." "I've secured that on paper," Dad used to say. I thought he was just being sentimental. I never read the will. 2 weeks after we buried him in 2022, Eleanor changed the locks. She said it was for security. It was the first door she slammed in my face. For the next 4 years, Eleanor and Sloane dismantled my existence. At Thanksgiving, I was told the gathering was intimate, just for those of us processing the immediate trauma. I found out later they had hosted 20 people. Christmas, I was seated at a folding table in the kitchen while Sloane's socialite friends occupied the mahogany dining table my father had built. Then there was the Arthur Vance Coastal Legacy Fund. I wanted to honor him, so I contributed $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year from my salary. Yet, in the annual reports, my name was nowhere. My contributions were lumped into a single line, the Sterling Vance family. I was sending my hard-earned money into a void. I wouldn't find out where that money was actually going for another 18 months. Tuesday, June 25th. Through the cold phone call from Eleanor, I received an email from Marcus Thorne, her attorney. He sent a voluntary quitclaim deed, asking me to transfer sole ownership of the glass house to a family trust. They weren't just locking me out anymore, they were asking me to sign away my father's soul. Instead of calling Eleanor, I dialed a number I'd saved for years, Thomas Calloway, my father's oldest friend. I was in his office by 2 o'clock the next afternoon. "I've been waiting for this call, Chloe," Thomas said, sliding a folder across the desk. Inside was the original will. The house was mine, free and clear. But then he pointed to Article 14.3, the forfeiture provision. Stated that if any beneficiary was proven to have misappropriated funds from the estate or the charity, they would forfeit their entire inheritance. "I'm the executor, Chloe," Thomas said. "I have the authority to activate this, but I need proof." Thomas hired Nina Aldridge, a forensic accountant with a personality like a cold chisel. For $8,500, she dug into the fund's records. What she found was a masterclass in greed. Over $340,000 had been funneled out of the charity into a shell company called Azure Lifestyle Management. The sole member of that company? Sloane Sterling. My donations were literally paying for Sloane's designer lifestyle and her new European sports car. Nina compiled a 47-page report. "They weren't even careful," she said. "They thought you were too broken to look." Plan was set for July 12th at the Harborview Hotel. Eleanor had invited the elite, including Margaret Hale, a reporter for the Nantucket Enquirer, and Victoria Marsh from the Attorney General's office. Eleanor wanted to announce that the glass house was being gifted to the community, a move to pressure me into signing the deed. I walked onto that stage after a tribute video for my father. Eleanor beckoned me up, her hand resting on my shoulder. "Chloe, dear, come up. Give us the keys to the future." I handed her the envelope. Eleanor, thinking she had one, tore it open. The brass keys hit the podium with a sharp clack. But it was the documents that followed, the audit, the forfeiture clause, and the proof of Sloane's shell company, that stopped her heart. "This is a misunderstanding," Eleanor stammered. But Thomas Calloway was already standing. "As the executor, I am freezing all assets." "This isn't a misunderstanding, it's a crime." The room erupted. Sloane panicked, leaning into a live microphone and whispering, "Mom, you said nobody would look at the books." The battle moved to the Barnstable County Probate Court on July 18th. I sat in my navy blazer next to Thomas. Across the aisle, Eleanor sat with a new attorney. Marcus Thorne had withdrawn from the case. Eleanor's lawyer fought for time. "Your Honor, we are filing an emergency motion to postpone. We need 60 days for discovery." But the state attorney general's office had sent a representative. "The state opposes any delay," they declared. "We believe any delay risks the further dissipation of estate assets while the fund remained under investigation." Courtroom in Barnstable County felt like a cathedral of cold facts. Thomas Calloway stood at the petitioner's table, his silver hair catching the fluorescent light as he moved with the steady, unhurried grace of a man who had spent 40 years in the service of the law. He didn't just present a case. He performed a surgical extraction of the truth. Thomas presented the case methodically. He entered into evidence the certified will of my father, Arthur Vance, the specific poison pill forfeiture clause found in Article 14.3, and Maya Chen's 47-page forensic audit report, a document that had already been filed with the court 10 days earlier, sitting like a dormant volcano in the judge's docket. Eleanor's new attorney, a sharp-featured woman with a voice like a violin string stretched to the snapping point, tried to pivot. She challenged the standing of the forfeiture provision, her voice rising as she argued that the clause was unusually punitive, draconian, and legally overreaching. She tried to paint Eleanor as a grieving widow being harassed by a vengeful stepdaughter. Judge Eleanor Garrett listened in a silence so profound it felt heavy. She reviewed the will's language for several long, agonizing minutes, the only sound in the room being the soft rustle of paper and the distant hum of the building's HVAC system. Finally, she removed her glasses and looked across the bench. The decedent's intent was not merely a suggestion, Judge Garrett said, her voice dropping into a register of absolute finality. Arthur Vance's language was precise, and the evidence of misappropriation provided by the state and the petitioner is unambiguous. He built a safeguard and the defendants tripped the wire. She read the ruling slowly, letting every word land like a stone in a still pond. The forfeiture clause is hereby activated. The defendant's entire inheritance share, the $1.2 million life insurance payout currently held in escrow, her equity interest in the coastal fund, and her claim to any jointly managed estate assets, is forfeited in its entirety. These funds are to be redirected to the Arthur Vance Coastal Legacy Fund under the management of Thomas Calloway as executor. Then came the words I had waited 4 years to hear. The property known as the Glass House is confirmed as the sole and separate property of Chloe Elaine Vance. No encumbrance, no dispute. Eleanor sat motionless through the ruling, her hands folded in her lap, staring at a point somewhere above the judge's head. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She looked as though she had been turned to marble. When it was over, she stood, buttoned her designer jacket with steady fingers, and walked out of the courtroom without looking at me. It was the first time in 4 years that Eleanor Sterling had nothing to say to me. And I realized with a strange, hollow clarity that her silence was the only honest thing she'd ever given me. The article went live at 6 a.m. on Monday, July 22nd. Julian Vane's byline ran across the top of the Nantucket Enquirer digital edition, Vance Legacy Fund under state scrutiny after gala revelation. It was a 2,200-word deep dive that sat on the front page of the online edition for 3 days. Cited the audit report, featured a statement from the State Attorney General's office, and provided on-the-record confirmation from Thomas that the forfeiture clause had been activated by judicial order. The article did not name me as the person who brought the evidence forward. Thomas, in his capacity as the estate's executor, was the formal complainant. I was mentioned only once, Chloe Vance, the sole heir to the Glass House property and a licensed architect specializing in historic coastal restoration. That was enough. That was more than Eleanor had ever allowed me to be in print. By noon, my phone had 47 unread messages. High school friends, former classmates, colleagues from firms in Boston, people I hadn't heard from in years were reaching out with some version of, "I had no idea," or "I always thought something was off." Gerald Whitmore texted a single line, "Proud of you, kid." You did him justice. The institutional fallout was immediate. Cape Cod 5 Bank announced the suspension of its $50,000 annual grant to the fund pending the outcome of the state's review. 2 individual donors, both of whom had sat through Eleanor's performance at the gala, withdrew pledges totaling $35,000. Eleanor posted a Facebook status that evening. "My family is going through a difficult time. I ask for privacy." It received 12 likes and 43 comments, most of which were questions she didn't have the courage to answer. Later that week, Julian Vane called me, not for a quote but for a moment of shared truth. "I'd heard rumors about that fund for 18 months, Chloe," he said. "But no one would go on the record. No one would confirm the numbers. You didn't just save your house, you gave the island its integrity back." I sat with that for a long time. My silence for 4 years hadn't protected my father's memory. It had only protected Eleanor. By August, the dominoes had a rhythm of their own. The Attorney General's office completed its preliminary audit in the 3rd week of the month. The conclusion was exactly what Maya Chen's report had indicated: $340,000 in funds dispersed without legitimate basis. Eleanor and Sloan were ordered to repay the full amount within 120 days or face civil charges under the state's charitable fraud statutes. Azure Lifestyle Management LLC was ordered dissolved by the Delaware Division of Corporations. Eleanor was removed as chair of the fund's board of directors. Thomas was appointed interim administrator with oversight from the AG's office. The fund, for the first time since its creation, had a financial structure that my father would have actually recognized. Personal toll was steep. Eleanor's luxury condo in Brooklyn, valued at nearly $1 million, was leveraged against the repayment obligation. Sloane was forced to sell her high-end SUV and her sailboat. Combined with the forfeited inheritance of $1.2 million, the total financial loss for the Sterling women reached approximately $1.635 million, plus an estimated $95,000 in legal fees. The social cost was harder to quantify but impossible to miss. Eleanor was removed from the organizing committee of the Summer Arts Festival. Her membership at the yacht club was quietly revoked. No public statement, just a formal letter and a return deposit. The money's traceable, the LLC is gone, and the state has everything they need, Maya told me during our final meeting. Financially, they're done. I thanked her, paid the remaining balance on her fee, and drove home through late summer traffic, thinking about a word I hadn't used in 4 years. Enough. For the first time, it didn't mean I wasn't enough. It meant this is enough. This is where the bleeding stops. The message came at 3:17 in the morning on a night in late August when the humidity was too heavy for sleep. Sloane's name glowed on my phone screen. I almost didn't open it. But something about the timestamp, the rawness of reaching out in the dead of night, made me swipe. I know you probably won't read this, but I didn't know about the LLC when Mom set it up. She told me it was legitimate consulting. I signed what she told me to sign. I'm not saying I'm innocent. I'm saying I didn't know how deep it went. I read it 4 times, sitting up in bed, the phone's blue light making my apartment feel like the bottom of a pool. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't believe her, parts of it rang true. I had seen the way Sloane deferred to Eleanor, the way she had been trained since childhood to nod and comply. But believing someone's confusion doesn't erase their choices. She signed every invoice. She deposited every check. The next morning I called Maya. Is there evidence Sloane knew the LLC was fraudulent? Maya was quiet for a moment. Sloane signed every invoice. She received every payment. Whether she understood the legal implications is a question for a psychologist, not an accountant. But in the eyes of the law, she's the face of the shell. I thought about Sloane for days. 26 years old, raised under Eleanor's roof and Eleanor's rules, never taught to question, never required to earn. If I'd grown up in that house instead of on the porch of the glass house with Dad, would I be different? I didn't know. But I knew that understanding someone's circumstances didn't mean accepting what they'd done with them. I saved the message. I had a feeling I'd need to read it again when I was ready to decide what kind of sister I wanted to be. September arrived with a sharpening of the light and a thinning of the crowds. For the first time in years, the season felt like it belonged to me. Gerald Whitmore invited me to join the Preservation Council as an architectural advisor. It was a volunteer position with no salary, but it was the first time my name appeared on any board in the conservation community. And it appeared because of my work, not my last name. The Nantucket Inquirer published a feature on the East End Lighthouse restoration in mid-September. The article was about the building, its history, its structural challenges, and the 18 months of careful work that brought it back from the edge of condemnation. My name appeared in the 4th paragraph. Chloe Vance, the project's lead architect, has earned a reputation for meticulous preservation work that balances historical integrity with modern resilience. There was no mention of the gala or Eleanor. That was exactly what I wanted, to be known for what I built, not for what almost got taken from me. My studio's phone started ringing more often. 3 new restoration contracts came in from homeowners between September and November, more than doubling what I'd earned the previous year. In October, Eleanor reached out through Thomas. She wanted to meet. I agreed, but on my terms. Thomas's office in Hyannis, Thomas present as mediator, no attorneys, no Sloane. We met on a Thursday afternoon. Eleanor looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe she just looked her age for the first time. No pearls, no silk, just a gray cardigan and a paper coffee cup she never drank from. She cried. She said, I only wanted to protect what Arthur built. I let her finish. Then I spoke. Eleanor, you didn't protect what he built. You tried to take what he left for me. I don't hate you, but I won't let you have access to my life the way you've had for the last 4 years. I laid out the boundaries. All communication regarding the estate would go through Thomas. Repayment to the fund must be completed in full. And I would not attend any event organized under the Vance name until the fund was fully restructured. She listened. She didn't argue. When I finished, she said quietly, "You sound just like your father." "Thank you," I said. "That's the best thing you've ever said to me." I drove to the glass house at the end of November. The air was cold and smelled of winter. The locksmith met me at 9 a.m. I watched him change every lock on every door. When he handed me the new keys, I held them in my palm and felt their weight. I hadn't set foot inside in 4 years. The house was intact but neglected. The porch boards were warped. The garden my mother had planted was gone to thistle. Eleanor hadn't maintained it. She'd used the house as a set piece, not a home. While pulling up a rotted plank on the porch, I found a wooden box wedged under the floorboards, a cigar box sealed with packing tape. Inside was a handwritten letter from Dad dated March 2022. "Chloe, if you're reading this, it means you found your way back. I knew you would. The house is yours, not because it's valuable, but because you're the only one who understands what it means. Don't let anyone tell you what your legacy should be. Build it yourself. Love, Dad." I sat on the porch and cried for the first time since the funeral. Not because I was sad, but because he'd known. He'd known what Eleanor would try, and he'd known I would come back when I was ready. By June 2025, the glass house was a school. I converted the ground floor into the Vance Fellowship, a residency for architecture students. I kept the second floor as my private space. It wasn't a sacrifice, it was a design choice, the same kind Dad taught me. How to share a building without losing the room that matters most. I didn't win a war. I won the right to stop fighting one. I used to think legacy was something you inherited. Now I know it's something you build. One boundary, one blueprint, one honest choice at a time. That's my story. And for the first time in my life, I'm the one holding the keys. If this story inspired you to set your own boundaries, make sure to subscribe and press the bell icon. And don't forget to drop a comment letting me know your city and what part of the world you're listening from.